Good afternoon. My name is Ala McCoy. I'm Director of Startup Support at the University of Maryland's Ventures. And I'm very happy to welcome everyone to today's session, today's installment of our Startup Fundamentals Workshop Series. This series is offered by Ventures in collaboration with Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship and MTech at the University of Maryland. We are recording this session, I am encouraging everyone to submit questions via the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. However, if you wish to, you can submit your question anonymously since we are recording it and will be posted on YouTube. So today I am very pleased to welcome David Powell. David has been a long-time entrepreneur in residence, now also MII site miner. And David has a very rich experience in entrepreneurship himself. And so today he will discuss a very important topic with us on how do you communicate value proposition? How do you decide and how do you formulate it and communicate it? And he will do so through the lens of his own entrepreneurial journey. So thank you so much, David. The microphone is yours. I'm gonna go ahead, turn off my mic, turn off my video, but I am here. I'll be monitoring the Q&A section and chat. So if anybody has any questions, please keep submitting them.
Great. Well, I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, I can see it. It's not in the presentation though.
Oh, let's have a look underneath this. There it is, I think. Is that correct?
Yep, that's perfect.
Good, good, good. So, Ala, thank you very much for a very warm invitation. And I'm privileged to be able to come and do the presentation today on value proposition. I think it is, let me just work out here how I'm going to advance. Yes. So I've had a very varied life. I've been very blessed in my life, I might add also. So I was born in the UK, but then when the company moved me here, which was an American company, I also became American at the same time, along with my family. So my first job was installing telephones, believe it or not, in what was those days the General Post Office, now is known as BT. And I studied advanced microwave. And then I got headhunted away by a big competitor, actually, called Rakel Milgo. And so the BT only did a 2400 bit per second modem. When customers, this is value proposition, wanted a 9600 bit per second modem. And Rakel were the only ones who did it. BT didn't. They were stuck at 2400. So I found myself many times a month taking out the BT equipment from customers while Rakel were busy putting in their 9600s. And they started saying to me, hey, how would you like to come and head up our customer service group? So I thought, well, BT kind of guaranteed me a job for life, which actually didn't work out that way because it's now a private company. But eventually I joined. So I became customer service engineer for Rakel Milgo. And then later I got headhunted from there to run a datacoms company. And the chairman of that company and myself are still great friends. Then I got headhunted away to become president or general manager of EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, for their echo canceller equipment that they were selling around the world. So today, if your call is via satellite, there is a transient delay. And for feedback, we've all got feedback in our headset. you get echo. And so our equipment went in with these switches, which I'll on one of my slides. One of those switches was installed in, say, like a Verizon, AT&T, but for me it was Deutsche Telekom in Germany, France Telecom in France. And so you'll see why we had a win-win, because the telephone companies were selling the big switches, electronic switches, huge room size electronics. But we were selling the echo cancellers to get rid of the annoying echo that people were experiencing on a phone call using France Telecom network or Deutsche Telekom network or BT network. So there was an opportunity for us to integrate our solution, and that will be covered as part of this presentation. And it's worthy to note that customers buy when they see value. They do not buy unless they see value. So I was managing director for EMEA, working with the telephone companies, was then recruited by the headquarters, by the board, to come over here and be president and COO of that company. And it was fun. We went through an IPO. That's when I was moved to the US, and we had a very successful exit. And at the same time, that company asked me to become a divisional head of what is or was a $3.5 billion company with 1,200 employees. They had 4 divisions, so I was one divisional manager. And then I've enjoyed in the last 10 years being an adjunct instructor mentor at George Mason, mentoring residents at George Washington, and entrepreneur in residence at UMD, where I'm fortunate to work under Allah. So my greatest success, my greatest business success, came from fully understanding the importance of value proposition. I think it's worthy to note also that we subconsciously only buy something if we see value. If we don't see value, then chances are we won't buy it. And the most bizarre example of that was many, many years ago. I was traveling on business in EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and sat by me on the plane was the head of sales and marketing for one of the big Paris fashion homes or fashion places. And so she said to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to meet with these different PTTs all around the world." And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm a buyer for," mentioned this this fashion house. I said, "Wow." And she got down from the luggage bin a handbag. And I said, "Wow." And I said, "You know, it's got the name on it and everything." And she said to me, "You know what? People buy this for $600, this handbag, because it's got our brand name on it. But it only costs us $10 to have it made." And that was an example that I will never forget. So even though it costs $10 to make, by putting their brand name on it, people saw value in buying it at $600. Which,
David,
yeah.
Sorry, we still see your introduction slide. I don't know if you
But yeah,
have
I'm just about to move on.
Oh, perfect, perfect. I wasn't sure.
Okay.
Got it.
No. Thanks, Vala.
Sorry to interrupt.
So what we can say is a value proposition is a concise statement of the benefits that a company is delivering to customers who buy its products and services. And effectively, To run a business, any business, including a startup, you have to define your value proposition. It can't be what you think it is. It has to be what your customer thinks it is. So, and this is why it's so important. The number one reason startups fail is because they are product focused, not customer focused. And during the day, most days I'm reviewing pitches, I'm reviewing applications. And one thing I'm looking for, which sadly I often see, is a team inward looking, like they'll mention, like, my product is novel. My product is a market changer. Well, you can say that, but the person who is going to review it and maybe give you a grant, they won't take your word for it. They've got to understand it themselves. Otherwise, you'll be number one on this here, building something that nobody wants. 30%, 36% of the total. So that's what this short workshop today is going to try and bring some meaning to. So when someone is buying your technology, or your product, I should say, or you're buying a product, is it the technology you're buying or they're buying? No. Is it the person behind the technology? No. Is it the features of the product? No. It is the benefit. Yes, I mean, if you're buying a product from a company like a Tesla, where the owner, the CEO is very well known, Elon Musk, it may help in the buying process. But right up there at the beginning has to be benefit. What is a benefit? I love going to Costco. I love wandering around the aisles. And I love seeing what kind of technology is coming out. But if I don't see a benefit of that product to me, I won't buy it. I'm just interested in looking at it. So here we've got some ideas about the features and benefits. And so a toothbrush. So the feature of a toothbrush is that it's got bristles on it. It's some kind of a stick. It can now be a bamboo stick, but it has bristles. And if that helps the individual, like this lady on the right, she's obviously got nice white teeth. So she would buy a toothbrush, not because it's got bristles and a bamboo stick. It's because it helps to give her white teeth. So here we go again. This is like the Apple. So if we look at the features here, loads of features about a good battery, obviously the megapixel camera, the display itself. And on the right, we see the benefit of the features. There's a reason why somebody wants a 4,000 milliamp battery, is because they want a long-lasting battery. There's a reason they want a 7-inch AMOLED panel, because it's comfortable screen size. And so I think, although we know that Apple, when they sell an iPhone, it only costs them $300 in physical cost, it has benefits that make that $1,200 that you buy it for, if you're buying it outright versus buying it through a cell phone company. But they are still benefits that you personally want to benefit from. So the features on one side, benefits on the other. And that's what we've always got to remember when we're selling. So what do these products have in common? Steve Jobs, he came on board actually when Apple built the Newton and found that it was really too advanced for what the market was looking for. A great idea. I've still got a PDA, a Hewlett-Packard one, which I haven't used for about 20 years. But they had a lot of benefit when they were out because there wasn't anything that was better than it. But Newton, the Apple Newton, was very proprietary, and that was where the benefit was negated by the cost. I think the biggest failure on Earth by not understanding the customer value is the Airbus A380. It was launched 10 years ago. Now they're scrapping them. It was a $23 billion write-off. And what Airbus thought was, they obviously didn't do customer discovery, because what Airbus thought was that with Boeing wrapping up the 747, there was nothing in the world to replace it. And that is very true. But it wasn't the direction that the airlines were going. The airlines were going away from centralized hubs to distributed mini hubs. And that's why the Dreamliner, the 787, is now such a successful airline, because it caters, and also Airbus have come out with their own planes now that does the same, where they are smaller, twin engines and not 4 engines. They can travel immense miles, and they can take off like from Dulles Airport, where I live right near, and fly to Australia without stopping, because they've made the fuel efficiency of a 2-engined aircraft way greater than they used to be. So Airbus appeared. I was fascinated by it. I remember on its inaugural flight to the US, it flew over my home. And I thought, wow, its inaugural flight is flown over my home. But quickly, like all these 3 products, CNN Plus being one, another one, they were great products. I remember that. Don't think just because they didn't catch on, they weren't great. They were. I mean, the Airbus was fly-by-wire. So it showed tremendous ingenuity, but they were great products that no one ultimately cared about. So don't ever think we're just looking at it from products they should never have wasted their time on. Well, in the case of the A380, they should have picked up that the airlines were becoming more distributed. They wanted to go to the smaller airports, not to Dulles, New York, which had to have the runways reinforced. They had to have new jetways installed because it's a double-decker. They failed to see that, and I don't know why. Books have been written about it. But they spent all that money, came up with a product that worked, great product, but just that nobody wanted to fly the old way anymore. So we're going to be looking at 3 forms of the benefit to who. And I certainly went through all these 3 in 1990 when I was hired to turn around a bankrupt company, Coherent Communications. Over 4 years, I eventually sold to all 3 sales channels shown above and in the order shown above. And I will explain the value proposition for each of those sales channel and then my story. So let's just go back. So we're going to look at end user, and a lot of startups, because they haven't got brand recognition, they have to sell directly B2C. And I can tell you, it's hard work because you own the customer, you support the customer, you handle returns, you handle repairs, you know everything there is to know about the customer. But you need, and when I was doing this, I had to be very, very careful with my own thought process that I wasn't leading the company down a path that we didn't have the resources to adequately maintain. And that is really, really important. So you find that you can only pick a certain market. Otherwise, you've got to start somewhere. So what's my thing here moving? Okay. So what you can do then is sell to a value-added reseller, someone who sells packages of solutions to people like Verizon, AT&T, the European PTTs, the Asian PTTs, Telstra in Australia was a big customer of mine. And then the next step is where we go B to B to B. We never have really any contact with the ultimate user. We're reliant on the OEM. So let's go through one of these at a time, and please put any questions up as you would like them answered. So Tesla is an interesting one. And by the way, the company in Australia was Telstra, which is the prevailing telephone company in Australia. They do both wireline services, broadband services, and wireless services. But Elon Musk said, I don't want a middleman between me and my customer. So Tesla, you can buy online, but somewhere along the line, you will go to a Tesla showroom where they take care of maintenance, etc. Any maintenance needs to get done. So that is an interesting one, a big company. Well, they've got a big market presence, and yet they deal only as a B2C. And in there, you could put yourself with your idea of how you will get initially in the market to get traction. The next one is a value-added reseller. Now, here, and it's the same with the computer I'm using here, which is a Dell. So in the case of Samsung, it's the case of all manufacturers of Windows-based computers. Most of them are with Intel. Yes, there are other chip manufacturers who compete against Intel to be included in a laptop or a desktop, but For the purpose of my example here, Intel is a big player in that market. So on my Dell laptop here, it's got Intel iCore 7. So they are actually not publicizing their own processor. They're advertising Intel. In this picture here, we know it's a Chromebook. We know the manufacturer is Samsung. But very important, we see that blue label, which is telling the world that it's got the Intel processor. And people do that because if Samsung wanted to come out with their own processor, it would be major. It's interesting to see where Tesla, because they decided to go to B2C, they are paying for an incredible infrastructure of charging stations to be built. And so they know that without the charging stations, you can't use your car, your Tesla car. So they are busy rolling out these charging stations, and it's costing them a lot of money. I've got a Sheetz gas station just down the road here, and they've built 8 of them. So there's the gas pump. I think the gas pumps may be about 8, but there's also 8 Tesla charging stations. And then we will look at original equipment manufacturer. So the product that my team designed and built was the coherent EC6000. So each of those cards you see plugged in there, it's got everything. It's got the power supply plugged in. It's got 8 supergroups on one side, 8 supergroups on the other. It's got the controller card, which is on the very far right. And so we would go into a customer. We would work very, very hard actually to do that. And I would be discussing with them, with my sales team. But as the president's chief operating officer, I also wanted to always keep close to customers. So the top picture is with the door closed on the front. And the bottom picture is the door open to show all the components. So I would go, when we went to a PTT, any PTT, telephone company, anyone handling mobile calls introduce a delay because it's the digital processing that takes place. And if the delay is more than about a few milliseconds, the human brain detects it as echo. And we sure don't want to, we sure don't want to be kind of annoying people. Like if we hear our own voice being echoed, we find it annoying. And so what we also found was that the integrated echo canceller that they were using inside the switches, like the Nokia DX200, was processor based. It wasn't an ASIC. And we were very focused on designing our own ASIC, the silicon, because we knew that using a standard off-the-shelf processor would never match what we did designing in our own silicon. And so we did customer discovery, and we found out that people making a call where they could not hear their voice being echoed at all, that call was on average 3 minutes longer than a call where they could hear their own voice, even if very slightly. And it used to annoy people. So they would say what they had to say and clear down. And so when we were making telephone calls as Coherent, we could tell exactly what digital processor they were using, because it's a general device, a digital processor off the shelf, whereas ours was uniquely designed to get rid of echo on a long distance telephone call or a cellular call. And so we would go into the customer and we would say to them, I think you're using PGAs from such and such. And they would say, yes, it's our engineers here have taken off the shelf PGAs and have designed an echo canceller. And they said, but it's not their expertise, such as in the case of Nokia. Nokia expertise was in switching lots and lots of calls at the same time. So using a program array, they actually was making the voice quality inferior. So we used to say to the Nokia customers, hey, how would you like it if we turned off your Nokia internal echo canceller, and we will connect our equipment between the outside world and your local switch? And they said that would be awesome. So we used to put in place a pilot. We would have clearly defined the pilot test plan. The engineers from Coherent, they would travel the world with equipment like this and install it. So we were turning off these very cheap and cheerful echo cancellers based on a PGA. And then we would connect just one of those chassis, just like you see. And the customer's reaction, because this picture on the left is inside the telephone room of I don't know which one it was. It was one of the European carriers. Could have been Deutsche Telekom. And that's the equipment installed, the switching equipment, which is part of the infrastructure that Nokia of Finland installed when they place their order, the customer placed their order. And we would go in there, disconnect their integrated canceller, and instead put one of the shelves of our equipment. Every operator that we did that with was like, wow, that call is so clear. And they said, is it possible for us to run our network without having, in this case, the Nokia homemade integrated echo canceller based on a PGA, change it out for your standalone? We said, yep. So that's how we were then we were still B2C, but we were getting into the area where we were maxing out the profitability of having to maintain, to sell, install, maintain. But what also was an interesting one, because I'm just looking here, what slide comes next? Yes. So to me, it was fun. I instructed our sales team, the support team, go and find everybody using a Nokia DX200 Work with them to convince them that they should allow you to disconnect the integrated Nokia owned and built echo canceller, replace it at the point where the switch interfaces the outside world, put in a shelf of our equipment. And it was a sure way of winning business. But again, we had to be selective. We couldn't go to every Nokia installation in the world. We weren't Nokia. Nokia was a huge company out of Finland. And they had built their business up over years. And what I wished would happen actually happened. So my engineers were going to Nokia every 3 months in Finland, and they were saying, look, guys, we want to integrate our technology into your switch. And the engineers would say, we know that because there's a lot of our installations now have your equipment installed and our equipment is switched off. And I said, well, yeah. I said, but we'd love to partner with you so that your integrated solution is our solution, not your PGA solution. And the engineers would always say, we're chasing you to catch you up. Because we're Nokia, we know one day we'll get our PGA echo canceller working as good as yours. And we used to go and see them the engineers saw them every quarter for 3 years. And then one day, the call I always wanted happened. The president of Nokia Mobile, he called me up and said, David, you don't know me, but he said, you have done work diligently with my engineers, trying to convince them that they should base our canceller on your solution. So he said, could you come to see me in Finland Monday next week? And I said, certainly, Laurie. Because he said, I'm going to announce that you, or Coherent, are going to be our partner. So he said, we're going to stop designing this competing product because we're never going to catch you up. We did a new iteration of silicon every 18 months. That's where most of my R&D money went. So myself and the support team, the sales team, we flew to Nokia. We knew everybody in the room because we've been talking to them, except for the president. And he just simply said, you've met these guys before, well, they're now our partners. And it was interesting because some of the engineers, the older guys, were in tears. And they came in with like a frame board or whatever they call it, where they had bits of wire hanging out. And they said, Laurie, we're just about here. But all you could see was all these wires hanging off this PCB. And he said, no. He said, I've given you 3 years, he said, to come up with a solution, and you haven't. So from a business point of view, we had gone from B to C. We had gone B to B with the value-added resellers who took our echo cancellers, just like the shelves you see there. And when they were putting together an integrated solution with someone's switch and somebody else's something or other, they were always putting our echo canceller in its frame into the solution. So selling direct, we had all the profit. When we were selling VAR, value-added reseller, we were losing about 30% of our product, but still, these value-added resellers had tentacles into many, many customers. And in actual fact, those pictures you see there were taken from a VAR partner's website, not from our own website. Now, when we started looking at the integration of our solution, the B2B2B, so we would sell to Nokia. Nokia would then sell to the telephone company. And then the solution was ultimately used by their subscriber base. And so they didn't want a shelf like this, because a lot of that was superfluous. They don't need a power supply. They don't need a metal shelf. They don't need a lot of the components on that shelf, the Echo Cancer EC6000, do certain functions, which they already did very well. It's just the echo cancelling part, which they didn't do well. So we sat down and said to them, if we produce an integrated solution with all the hooks just on the technology, the ASIC technology, that's all effectively what you want, isn't it? And they said, absolutely. We don't want to add any more hardware to the to what's already installed at a customer's premise. We just want to replace that FGA or the PGA device that we have been building to yours. So out of all those thousands of components, they just wanted our ASIC. And so we built many safeguards in to the solution, but we extracted just our the application-specific integrated circuit that made our product so great. It was the design, it was our expertise in ASIC programming, designs of ASICs. That equivalent, so if we look at the price per channel when we were selling directly, just say, for instance, it was $100 per channel. When we sold it through an integrator, a value-added reseller, they would buy it as is, but they had to have some profit to be able to make money on their sale to their customer. So they would take about 30% off that. So then we were getting $70 per channel. And no savings actually in hardware. So they still had to buy it with power supplies, controllers, 16 supergroup cards. What Nokia wanted was, they wanted just our ASIC on a board with the hooks that would fit inside those closed doors. Inside those closed doors, they're line cards, as we call them. And they just wanted to take their own hodged up echo canceller off their board, little board, and use ours instead. And they wanted to pay no more than $25 per channel. What was really interesting was, and it took me a lot of work persuading our board that they were ending up paying less for a better product. But let me tell you, the operational savings were enormous. So Nokia was one of the biggest cellular switching companies in the world. Sadly, they don't really exist today. And so they had their tentacles in most of the PTTs in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, actually. And so some of them were dangerous places to work. But Nokia had their presence there. And I said to Nokia, and we put it in the contract, do you promise never to sell your PGA-based solution? Again, you will always sell ours. And they said, yeah. Suddenly, we didn't need a sales force. We kept the sales force because there was some non-Nokia in stores. But ultimately, I won some of those over as well. So it took us about 15 months to come up with the development of just the ASIC and the software. Nothing changed on that. And then they would never install their FPGA. And they launched. And they would openly say to their customer, this is the coherent technology now that we're using. They paid me, or paid the company, $25 a channel compared to $100 if we were selling direct. A typical direct sale with a PTT would be about $5 million. So when we were kind of threading, convincing a Nokia customer to disable the integrated and put ours on the outside, where we never lost a sale, Nokia already had that built in to their product. Nokia handled all the selling, all the integration, etc. Nokia's first sale order they placed with us was $50 million. My margins were greater, way, way greater than selling directly to their customer. Just because I still had a high profit element that they were using, which was my ASIC. So we were a small company, by the way. This is very important. There were only 8 of us in the European office. And we won the Nokia integration as an OEM. And it was enjoyable, and because of this. So there's Finland, Helsinki. There's Nokia Finland, its headquarters. And that boat, the Silja line, played a big part in my life. So I was also trying to get Ericsson to do the same in their switch. Instead of having a lousy FPGA echo canceller, use ours. And I was never successful. You can't win them all. We won Alcatel. We won Nokia. We won Nortel. There was about 5 or 6 that we won with integration, which resulted in these big orders when they come in. So that $50 million order from Nokia lasted them about 3 months. And then there was another, a bit more than that, maybe 7 months. And then they were lining up their next order for us. So when I was planning my business every year, I would plan direct sales to those who didn't have a part, buying equipment, switching equipment from those manufacturers who were not partnering with us. Those value-added resellers who were, by taking our whole shelf and everything that it was in there they needed, to the OEM, where they just wanted our ASIC on a small board with all the hooks to link into their switch. And so when I was going to Helsinki, I used to fly to Sweden to start with to meet with my team and the people at Ericsson, Stockholm. And then at night, we would get on that's a ferry. And we used to sail overnight from Stockholm to Helsinki. It was cheaper than booking an air flight and a hotel because there was a reason for that. The Scandinavian countries tax alcohol extremely highly. And so people, Norwegians and Swedish people, even Finns, would take this boat just to sail between Finland and Helsinki and Stockholm, and drink themselves silly on as much alcohol that they could consume, and then do the same on the way back. And so that's how they used to overcome only being able to drink by paying a heavy tax. So that was an incredible experience in my life. And it is today why I strongly suggest that start at B2C. You have to get a presence. As you start to build a brand name, the OEMs of the value-added resellers will come knocking on your door. And then ultimately, you want to be the sole supplier by having your integrated board that they install. I mean, the board was no more than about, maybe 6 inches by 6 inches. And it had our ASIC on it, had a few other bits and pieces as the hooks. But that profit on that 50 million each time was incredible. It resulted in us being acquired. So in just that respect, the company went from being bankrupt, to being bought for just over $1 billion. So when we were doing 100 million, which was a lot of it was made up by the integration, we got a bid. The shareholders they presented, we were a public company. So we were approached for a takeover. And $1 million, we couldn't say no. But we would never have got $1 billion if we had remained trying to sell directly. If we would remain trying to sell directly and a value-added reseller. We did it because we did all three. So, and that boat, by the way, during the summer, it never gets dark in Helsinki and Stockholm. So some nights when we were traveling, I would go out onto the bow at the front as that ferry was negotiating 1,000 islands in the archipelago around Stockholm. So it was a fun time of my life, stressful time of my life, but wow, I was blessed to be able to do it and take part in it. So any questions, please?
Thank you, David. Such a fascinating story, and it's always interesting to hear how people who manage companies come to the realization of the pivots that they have to make. So thank you for sharing that.
And actually, we've got two questions. Do you know one of them? And this shows I'm wrong there because I'm using abbreviations. when the audience are not too sure what it is I'm talking about. So that's also a slap on my wrist. And I don't remember what the abbreviations are for. Let me have a look at PTT.
Well, the first question came fairly early in the presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Postal, telegraph, and telephone service. And the reason for that is because they were mostly government owned. And then the B and C. The B is when you're selling to a business. And think C is the customer, the end user. So when some things we buy, and a great example is windscreen wipers on a car, a brand new car. So the manufacturer of the motor car decide which business they're going to sell the windscreen wiper manufacturer. They get picked on a Subaru. You're going to get a Michelin set of tires or windscreen wipers. But it doesn't mean that Michelin own me as a customer. Subaru own me more of a customer because it's a total product they're selling me. So that is why we have B and C. C, you're selling to the end user. B, you're selling to a business. And as you can see, in the case of Nokia, it was B to B to B. I, as Coherent, as a B, was selling it to Nokia as a B. Nokia as a B was selling it to Deutsche Telekom, the mobile operator in Germany, as a B. The end user is the person who is paying for the service from Deutsche Telekom. Does that make sense, Thomas?
I think those questions were from Anonymous. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you will always start off, I bet you will always start off B2C because you don't get the traction. As you go B2B as a integrator, you're now getting traction. And then when you go B2B2B, you've certainly made your mark on the market and they tend to come to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Any other questions from anybody, please?
And to the audience, if you would like to raise your hand and ask your question that way, you can do that. I can unmute your mic. If you prefer that to type in, or you can submit questions the usual way.
And by the way, as an EIR at University of Maryland, there's many of us, quite a few colleagues on that. This is the area that we want to help you with, because many of us have gone through it. Many of us can help you through the pitfalls. One, you don't want them reverse engineering your solution. And there's ways and means you can stop that.
That is true. So David is available for EIR meetings, and you can schedule a time if you can't think of a question now, but you think of one, you can schedule time with him later. So there's a question, what is the best way to build customer relationship?
That's a great question, Martine. So you start off by building your direct sales, which is B2C. And it was awesome to watch my sales and support team building the relationship without plugging the product. So they would like to know more about their network. And I never forget, we had one year our sales award, and there was a guy in my staff who thought he was a pretty slick sales guy. He was a good sales guy. But at the awards, the support guy won more awards than the sales guy. And he came into my office the next day and he said, David, I think I'm a pretty good sales guy, but Graham, he won way more awards than I did because he sold a lot more product than I did. And I said to him, he's fortunate that he's a support guy. Because when he's talking to the customer, they think, well, this guy is not working to a sales quota. He's a support guy. And so I can totally trust everything he says. And he won't be biased towards your product. And that is true. And so, as I said to him, customers valued that. They knew they were getting a total, honest, non-persuasive discussion with Graham, the head of support. And it motivated them like, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm buying. Whereas when the sales guy, Simon, when he started talking to them about the benefits, the features and the benefits, they felt a little bit that they were in a corner and they tried to avoid it. So I'm of the firm believer you don't have to be a top line sales guy to be successful in your startup. If you've got that empathy to have a cup of coffee, go for a burger with their archetypes, because in every customer, there's a buyer, there's an end user, there's the recommender, there's the integrator, and there's the saboteur, a guy who doesn't want to change their relationship, even if the voice quality is crummy. And so I would always say, you don't need to be a hard-hitting sales guy. If you're somebody who just can integrate, take them for a cup of coffee, take them for a burger, don't be product focused the whole time you're there. You'll build up enormous bonds. And it happened with me and Nokia, by the way. The president of Nokia, he would always say to me, David, I trust you. Do you trust me sufficiently that we don't have to sign a contract to start this work? And in Europe, I said, being a European, I said, absolutely, we'll do a handshake. And people back here, the board that I reported to, the CEO, said, no, you can't do that. I said, let me show you the power of a handshake in Europe. So it used to take a month to get the contract sorted out. But a handshake was instant. And when I became president and chief operating officer, a handshake was sufficient for me to start a development. Does that help, Martine? Remember, when you're interfacing to a customer, it's not 100% selling. It's not an interrogation. It's building a bond.
Yeah, my team responded in the chat that it was helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Well,
Anytime.
thank you. Yeah. Thank
And
you.
I hope I can help you as a EIR.
Thank you. And I actually posted the link to schedule time with David. If anybody is interested, David is available every week, and you can schedule some time with him. It's also, it's helpful to run what you're looking at. It's easy to look backwards and say, this is what we did and this is why. And it's easy to look backwards and yeah, that makes perfect sense. But when you're in the moment, it can be difficult to see. So having somebody like David guide you through that might help you a lot. So I highly encourage you to sign up to meet with David soon.
Thank you.
Yep. So
Well,
thank you so much, David.
Thank you for attending the presentation. I'm grateful for that.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your story with us. It's very interesting, very fascinating. I'm sure we could spend hours and hours and hours listening to what you have to share with us, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll schedule a follow-up session sometime in the spring.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you to everyone who attended the session and stuck to the very end, even past the scheduled 1 hour time. And thank you, David, for spending time with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.